He had no idea the faceless entity was sitting quietly just a few feet away, observing his final, pathetic display. The boardroom hummed with a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My father, Alistair, stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, his face a mask of barely contained fury, punctuated by a sneer that seemed permanently etched onto his lips. "This is an outrage," he boomed, slamming a fist on the table, making the ornate water glasses rattle. "A hostile takeover? From whom? Some anonymous shell corporation? I will crush them. They don't know who they're dealing with." Every eye in the room, from the nervous board members to the stone-faced legal team, was fixed on him. But my gaze, calm and unwavering, was fixed on the single document resting before me. It was a formal notice, crisp and pristine, signifying the finality of a long, deliberate journey. Alistair, caught in his own bluster, hadn't even spared me a glance since I'd entered the room, ostensibly as an observer for my own small, burgeoning tech firm, Veridian Innovations. He still saw me, if he saw me at all, as the worthless daughter he'd discarded years ago. His theatrics were predictable, his arrogance unwavering. He believed himself untouchable, the master of his domain. He saw only a threat from an unseen, faceless entity. He had no idea the faceless entity was sitting quietly just a few feet away, observing his final, pathetic display. I felt no rush of adrenaline, no surge of vengeance. Only a profound, quiet certainty. He could rage all he wanted, the game was already over. He just hadn't read the last page. My story didn't begin in a gleaming boardroom, but in the shadows of a gilded cage. From the moment I could understand words, my father, Alistair, taught me one thing: I was a disappointment. Worthless, he'd scoff casually, dismissing my childhood drawings, my youthful enthusiasms, my every nascent ambition. "You'll never amount to anything, Kaelen. Not like me. You don't have the killer instinct." My mother, a perpetually anxious woman, would offer weak apologies, but never intervention. The family business, Alistair Corp, a sprawling conglomerate built on the bones of older, less ruthless companies, was his kingdom, and I was an unwanted heir, a persistent stain on his perfect legacy. I tried, for years, to earn his approval. I studied business, excelled in school, even tried to intern at his company. But every achievement was met with derision, every idea with contempt. "That's amateur hour, Kaelen. Don't you understand how the real world works?" The final blow came when I was 24. I presented him with a detailed proposal for a new tech division, something forward-thinking and innovative. He laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that echoed in my bones. "You think you can teach me about technology? While you're still talking about venture capital, I'm buying entire industries. No, Kaelen. You're a liability. You're disowned. Don't bother coming back." He didn't just fire me, he cut me out of his life, financially and emotionally. The relief, surprisingly, was immediate. The shackles were off. That day, sitting alone in a small, rented apartment, the sting of his words, "worthless," became a molten core of resolve. I had nothing to lose but everything to prove, not to him, but to myself. My secret weapon wasn't a family inheritance or a network of old boys, it was my mind, my resilience, and a burning conviction that technology held the key to the future, a truth my father's old-world empire was blind to. I lived on ramen noodles and caffeine, fueled by a ferocious drive. My days were spent coding, my nights networking with other disillusioned tech enthusiasts. I pored over every algorithm, every emerging trend, every market gap. I sought out mentors who saw potential, not a discarded legacy. My secret weapon was Veridian Innovations. I started it in that tiny apartment, building something truly revolutionary, an AI platform designed for hyper-efficient data analysis and predictive modeling, initially for supply chain optimization, a sector Alistair Corp dabbled in but never truly innovated. It was a slow, grueling climb. I faced countless rejections, mocked for my youth and lack of corporate pedigree. But I learned. I adapted. I iterated. I assembled a team of brilliant, hungry individuals who believed in my vision because they saw the logic, the potential, and the sheer audacity of it. We worked in obscurity, focusing on delivering unparalleled results for our niche clients. Every dollar earned was reinvested, every success a quiet victory. While Alistair paraded his worthless daughter around as an example of failure, I was meticulously building an empire, brick by digital brick, entirely out of his sight. The money I was making wasn't just profit, it was power. The knowledge I was gaining wasn't just data, it was leverage. While I was quietly building Veridian Innovations into a formidable force, Alistair remained blissfully ignorant, or rather, arrogantly dismissive. My company's success, when it finally began to register on the periphery of the business world, was scoffed at by him. Hobby money, he'd tell his cronies. A fad. She'll crash and burn, just like I always said. He was too preoccupied with his own increasingly outdated empire, Alistair Corp, to notice the tectonic shifts occurring beneath his feet. His company, once a titan, was stagnating, burdened by legacy systems, inefficient operations, and a chronic inability to adapt. He continued to rely on brute force acquisitions and cutthroat practices, oblivious to the fact that the landscape had changed. I, however, was watching. Every quarterly report of Alistair Corp, every news article, every whisper from disgruntled former employees, I absorbed it all. I built sophisticated AI models within Veridian to predict market trends and corporate vulnerabilities, and Alistair Corp became my unwitting case study. My algorithms highlighted their declining market share, their crippling debt, their aging infrastructure, and their rapidly losing talent to innovative startups, like mine. My plan began to unfold with quiet precision. I started by acquiring smaller, struggling tech companies that had valuable intellectual property or key personnel, but lacked the funding to scale. These were often companies Alistair Corp had once considered buying, then dismissed. I integrated their technologies into Veridian, strengthening our portfolio and expanding our market reach. Alistair would sometimes hear about these acquisitions, but he'd only smirk. Snapping up scraps, Kaelen? That's for small fry. He thought I was playing checkers while I was setting up a chessboard. The true work began when I started discreetly buying shares of Alistair Corporation. It was a meticulous process, conducted through a series of shell corporations and blind trusts, designed to keep my identity completely hidden. My legal and financial teams worked around the clock, acquiring small parcels of shares from various institutional investors and exasperated shareholders who were losing faith in Alistair's leadership. The stock price was depressed, a direct result of his mismanagement, making the acquisition even more appealing. He knew someone was buying, but he dismissed it as a minor inconvenience, some opportunistic hedge fund looking for a quick flip. He even publicly ridiculed the anonymous bidders, calling them cowardice and spineless. His arrogance solidified my resolve. He was digging his own grave, and I was merely providing the shovel. The silence from my end, the lack of a direct challenge, was interpreted by him not as strategic patience, but as weakness. He became bolder, more condescending, more convinced of his own invincibility. He never saw the storm gathering, because he was too busy admiring his own reflection. The silence that preceded the storm was deafening. Alistair, blinded by his own hubris, had called this emergency board meeting himself, convinced he was about to outmaneuver some faceless corporate raider. He strode in, radiating indignation, and began to outline his strategy to repel what he called a pathetic, ill-conceived attack. He spoke of loyal shareholders, ironclad contracts, and the unshakable foundation of Alistair Corporation. The irony was palpable. Then, there was a knock at the door. My lawyer, a formidable woman named Evelyn, entered, holding a stack of documents. She approached the table, her gaze sweeping over the astonished faces before landing coolly on Alistair. Mr. Alistair, as counsel for the acquiring party, I am here to formally present the comprehensive tender offer that has now been fully accepted by a controlling majority of shareholders. She placed the thick binder precisely in front of him. Alistair's face contorted in disbelief. What is this nonsense? I haven't even had a chance to counteroffer. Who are you people? Evelyn turned and gestured towards me. Mr. Alistair, allow me to introduce Kaelen, the majority shareholder. The new owner of Alistair Corporation. The air in the room instantly vanished. A collective gasp, then stunned silence. Alistair's eyes, wide with shock, finally landed on me. The realization dawned on his face, a grotesque mixture of recognition, horror, and incandescent rage. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. I rose slowly, deliberately, my movements calm and controlled. I walked towards him, the click of my heels the only sound in the cavernous room. I stopped directly across the table from him, my eyes locking with his. His face was blotchy, his jaw working uselessly. "Hello, Father," I said, my voice level, devoid of any emotion, any hint of the childhood longing or the teenage pain he had inflicted. "We've been here before, haven't we? Only this time I'm not asking for a chance. I'm taking it." I picked up the formal termination notice that Evelyn had laid out earlier, its pristine white paper a sharp contrast to the chaos in his eyes. "For years, you told me I was worthless. You disowned me. You dismissed every idea I had, every effort I made. You said I'd never amount to anything, that I didn't have the killer instinct. You were wrong." I slid the paper across the table towards him. His trembling hand reached for it, his eyes darting between me and the document. "This company, Alistair Corp, is now part of Veridian Innovations. It has been for months, piece by piece, shareholder by shareholder. You were too busy counting your old money to notice the new world emerging around you. And now, I'm afraid, your services are no longer required." My voice was calm, almost clinical. "Consider yourself terminated, effective immediately." I looked around the room, meeting the astonished gazes of the board members. "As of this moment, I am the CEO of the newly merged entity. And my first act is to ensure that toxic leadership never poisons this company again." Alistair looked at the document, then back at me, his face contorted in a silent scream of betrayal and disbelief. The man who had once called me worthless was now utterly, completely without worth in my new domain. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Alistair, the formidable titan of industry, utterly unraveled. He began to shout, to rage, to threaten lawsuits, but his words were hollow, devoid of the power they once held. The board members, initially frozen in shock, quickly shifted their allegiance. The numbers on the termination notice, the perfectly legal and irrefutable proof of my majority ownership, spoke louder than any of Alistair's bluster. They saw the writing on the wall, the future I represented versus the rapidly crumbling past he clung to. Within hours, news of the hostile takeover exploded across financial media. Tech upstart buys out beleaguered conglomerate, daughter takes down father's empire. The headlines were sensational, but the truth was far more nuanced. Alistair's public breakdown at the meeting was quickly leaked, solidifying his image as a dinosaur incapable of adapting. His former allies, sensing the shift in power, began to distance themselves. Years of his cutthroat business practices and abusive demeanor had created a vast reservoir of resentment, and now, it all came rushing to the surface. No one came to his aid. He was truly alone. For me, the aftermath was not a moment of triumphant celebration, but one of quiet, almost weary, satisfaction. There was no joy in seeing my father's humiliation, only a profound sense of closure. The worthless girl had not only built her own empire, but had taken over the one that had once cast her out. In the months that followed, the integration of Alistair Corp into Veridian Innovations was a monumental task. We retained the skilled employees, the valuable assets, and the established client relationships, but fundamentally re-engineered the company culture. The oppressive, fear-driven leadership that Alistair had fostered was systematically dismantled, replaced with an ethos of collaboration, innovation, and respect. There were many legacy issues to untangle, years of neglect and poor decision-making to rectify, but with my team, we systematically rebuilt it. Alistair faded into obscurity. Rumors circulated of financial difficulties, of being ostracized by the very circles he once commanded. I never sought him out, nor did he attempt to contact me. The chapter was closed. Today, several years later, the merged entity, now simply known as Veridian Corp, is a thriving, ethical tech powerhouse. We lead our industry, not by exploiting others, but by genuinely innovating and fostering an environment where talent flourishes. I walk through the halls of what was once Alistair Corp, now completely transformed, and I feel a deep sense of peace. The echoes of worthless have long since faded, replaced by the hum of innovation and the vibrant energy of a team building something truly meaningful. My journey taught me that true worth is not something bestowed upon you by others, especially those who seek to diminish you. It is not found in external validation, inherited titles, or the size of a corporate empire. True worth is built, brick by brick, through resilience, integrity, unwavering self-belief, and the courage to pursue your own path, even when everyone else tells you you're destined to fail. The greatest revenge is not to bring others down, but to elevate yourself and those around you, proving that worth is not a birthright, but a testament to what you build with your own hands, your own mind, and your own indomitable spirit.